Hello and welcome to today's web seminar hosted by ACTEGA. There are still some people joining, but I would say we start now. I'm Alexander Morik, Social Media Manager, and I'll be moderating today. So the title of our presentation is Safe Varnishing in Food Packaging Printing, a strong evidence for certified material health, product safety, and ecological quality. We are joined for this by Dr. Lisa Schönberg and Thomas Koop, who in a very short time will talk you through this topic. Dr. Lisa Schönberg is the Global Portfolio Manager for Paper and Board at ACTEGA, together with Thomas Koop, who is responsible for the portfolio management in Europe. Unfortunately, Dr. Hans-Michael Lenz can't join us today, but he's the right contact at ACTEGA for any questions about quality control, environment, and product safety. Before I hand over for our presentation, there are just some housekeeping points I would like to mention. There will be about 15 minutes at the end of this web seminar reserved for a Q&A session. Please send us your questions in the chat of this web seminars room, and we can put them to our presenters later on. Any technical questions you can address to myself, as I'm also the administrator of today's web seminar. So now I would like to hand over to Lisa, who will start the presentation.
Thank you, Alex, for the kind introduction, and also a very warm welcome to all of you from our side. It is a pleasure to give you an insight into the world of safe varnishing in food packaging printing today. Before we dive deeper into today's topic, we would like to give you a brief introduction about the Altana Group. As a globally operating specialty chemicals company, Altana generated revenues of 2.18 billion euros during the last fiscal year. 7% of those revenues are reinvested in Altana's research and development, which is an above average share compared to other companies of the sector. Within the past 10 years, Altana has successfully handled 30 acquisitions. The most recent for ACTEGA was the acquisition of the overprint varnish specialist Schmidt-Reiner, which is now part of our global setup. Around about 6,500 employees in 4 divisions contribute to Altana's success. At ACTEGA, we're leading in the development and production of specialty coatings, printing inks, adhesives, and sealants, with a focus on the packaging and printing industry, as well as plastic compounds for the healthcare industry. Our product lines provide materials with an attractive visual and tactile appearance and defined functionalities. As a result of our dedicated teams in the global network, we provide customer-driven, innovative solutions based on integrated chemical, formulation, regulatory, and application expertise that make products of daily life better, safe, and more sustainable. Our solutions also open up growth or savings potential for our clients and can change entire markets. In our 11+ laboratories around the globe, we work with state-of-the-art tools and equipment and rely on our expertise, sophisticated in-house analytics, and broad regulatory know-how. Through our global and decentralized setup of R&D, sales, and marketing, we provide global product solutions for our customers, regardless of their location. But let us now turn to the actual topic of our webinar today. During the next roundabout 40 minutes, we would like to show you why it is important to take responsibility seriously and what ACTEGA does to ensure your safety and how we make it our first priority. Food packaging is a very sensitive topic and must be considered very carefully in many respects. The fulfillment of food packaging regulations, guidelines, and norms is a basic requirement for the safety of foodstuff in packaging printing. It must be ensured that potentially migrating substances do not have any harmful effects on health, both human and nature. All safety precautions on the part of the substrate, ink, or coating manufacturers do not release the packaging manufacturer from his liability. The analysis if an overall packaging is suitable for the designated filling good rests upon the responsibility of those who bring the packaging into circulation. The use of food contact materials for packaging that is in direct or indirect contact with food is essential because potential migrants could potentially harm human health, unacceptably alter the composition of the foodstuff, or lead to an impairment of the odor and taste of the food. Therefore, the transfer of such harmful intentionally or non-intentionally added substances to the packed filling good must be avoided under all circumstances. The migration behavior is influenced by many different aspects. The barrier properties of the packaging composition, for instance, the used substrate or applied inks, coatings, or adhesives. The processing conditions, as these have an impact on volume, coverage, and drying behavior of the consumables. The character of the filling good. There are tremendous regulatory differences between dry, fat-containing, fatty, or liquid foods, for instance. Depending on the product and its chemical composition, the migration potential can be significantly affected. And lastly, the contact time and temperature of the filling good to the packaging. Also, the interruption of the cold chain, different temperatures between filling and storage, and the minimum shelf life or the intended duration of use have a significant impact on the migration or the test parameters of migration studies. When we talk about food contact materials, it is important to differentiate between direct and indirect food contact. On the one hand, the migration potential differs, and on the other hand, the formulation of the coatings as well as migration tests may be adapted to the specific conditions. In the case of direct food contact, the coating physically touches the filling good, or direct contact takes place through gas phase transfer. The migration potential is particularly high in this case. With indirect food contact, the coating is applied to the outside of the packaging, and the filling good can possibly come into contact with the materials. How this can occur can be explained by the different types of migration. The type of migration that is often underestimated but occurs quite frequently, in fact, is set-off migration. Typically, set-off migration takes place in the sheet pile or during roll-up of the webs when the printed side of a sheet touches the unprinted side of another sheet, which is later on brought into contact with food. If the coating film is not completely dry, or some substances otherwise migrate to the unprinted reverse side of the paper or board, substances could migrate unintentionally to the filling material. This is one of the reasons why we at ACTEGA also recommend food-safe coatings, meaning coatings for the direct food contact, for the use on the outside of packaging, simply to prevent set-off migration. Another risk is the penetration migration. In this case, substances from the substrate, the inks, or the coating may be transferred to the filling good through the entire construction. This risk is particularly high in the case of direct food contact, but is also not excluded in the case of indirect food contact. To prevent or at least minimize potential migration, absolute or functional barriers can be used in addition to appropriate formulation and composition of the packaging components. Absolute barriers are impermeable materials such as metal or glass. In this case, for instance, the folded box is just a secondary packaging. Migration of undesirable substances into the filling good is not possible at all. A functional barrier, on the other hand, prevents or at least minimizes the migration. This is strongly dependent on the selected type of functional barrier. Although functional barriers make the final food packaging legally compliant, a possible set-off migration must be strictly avoided. Existing solutions are, for instance, plastic films. When food contains substances that consumers do not expect or do not want to find there, the public debate quickly fires up. Plasticizers in olive oil or printing ink ingredients in beverages are just a few examples. Consumers think it's scandalous, producers are looking for causes, and politicians are trying to find reliable data to quickly get a grip on the situation. With that being said, let's dive deeper into the topic of legal compliance in food packaging and talk about important regulations and frameworks that must be followed in the European legal area. Cereal or pasta packaging, beverage cartons, frozen food packaging, or bakery boxes. These are all materials intended to come in contact with food. They are subjected to strict legal regulations. Regulation number 1935/2004, the so-called Framework Regulation, adopted by the European Parliament and the Council of the EU on October 27, 2004, applies to all materials used in food contact. Packaging materials must be produced in such a way that under normal and foreseeable conditions of use, their components do not migrate at all or are transferred to the food only in quantities that do not endanger the health of the consumer. Accordingly, approved raw materials must meet defined purity criteria. Conformity must be ensured with migration limits, and moreover, the traceability of materials must be ensured at all levels of the supply chain. Since 2011, Regulation number 10/2011 has been in place, bringing into force a European regulation with direct legal effect. The so-called Plastic Directive, or shortly PIM, establishes a binding positive list of monomers and additives that may be used in the production of materials for food contact. Before being included in these lists, the substances must be tested for their possible transfer to food and their toxicological properties. As a result of the testing, limits are set for the migration of the substances to food. And this means that toxicological data are available for substances included in the list, which makes it easier to assess the health risk in the event of migration to food. In addition, food simulants for total migration testing are defined in this directive. And since there is no legal basis specifically for coatings, and due to the lack of alternative regulations, the contents of the PIM are also adapted as a basic guideline for non-plastic packaging. Therefore, we use the global migration limits of 60 milligram per kilogram, as well as specific migration limits for the evaluation of our coatings. A very common regulation in the industry is the ordinance of the Swiss Federal Department of Home Affairs on materials and articles intended to come into contact with food. Although not a European member state, Switzerland is the only country in Europe that currently has legislation in place specifically regulating food packaging. The Swiss ordinance applies to all food packaging manufactured in Switzerland, but also to food packaging imported from abroad. In this way, the Swiss ordinance has become a de facto important standard by which many companies in the EU evaluate coatings in the absence of a harmonized EU legislation. In this ordinance, there is a positive list of substances that can be used for printing on food packaging. The positive list in Annex 10 is further divided into two parts. Part A contains only substances that have been evaluated. Part B, on the other hand, lists unevaluated substances. By naming the Nestle Guide to Packaging Inks as a basic requirement, the Swiss ordinance also shows relevance beyond national borders. Lastly, in the production of food contact materials, the obligations of the so-called Good Manufacturing Practice Regulation, number 2023/2006, apply in principle. This regulation refers to Framework Regulation 1935-2004, according to which food contact materials must be manufactured in accordance with good manufacturing practice. The GMP regulation specifies what this exactly means. Included are all aspects of quality assurance that ensure that materials are produced and tested in a consistent manner. In addition, quality standards appropriate to their intended end use must be met. Here, in particular, it is important to implement a good risk management system. In this context, substances that are intentionally or unintentionally added to the product must be evaluated. What do these regulations and frameworks mean for you as a packaging manufacturer or for us as a supplier of consumables? To ensure that food packaging complies with the law, the following aspects have to be taken into account. With regard to the PIM, the defined food similants, it is substantially important to know which filling good is to be packed. Does the packaging have direct or indirect food contact? Will an absolute or functional barrier be used? This certainly has an influence on the materials used. Depending on the technology, waterborne or UV coatings, other regulations apply and must be taken into account. The packaging manufacturer must ensure that all materials used, inks, coatings, substrate, and all other substances, are suitable for use in food packaging. In addition, all legal requirements must be met. Compliance with good manufacturing practice must be ensured. So the question is, have all necessary quality assurance measures been defined? And finally, and this again has an influence on the setup of the migration tests, the storage conditions and the storage time must be known. If you consider all these questions in the checklist and take appropriate action, there is nothing holding you back from producing legally compliant food packaging. Knowledge about legally compliant food packaging is only one side of the medal. How all these important requirements are implemented consistently is now introduced to you by Thomas.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lisa, and a warm welcome as well from my side to all attendees. So in the last minutes, we have heard a lot about regulations, and of course, these requirements result in different consequences. This applies to different areas, in particular, the raw materials that we use for our formulation. Secondly, the production and the quality assurance. And last but not least, the product and product safety. So let's go a little more into detail. Looking on the left side of this slide, we want to show you what exact requirements apply in terms of raw materials. And on the right side, you can see our implementations. So starting with the requirements, our raw materials must be compliant with purity criteria, ban lists, and specifications, plus they only consist of authorized substances. Therefore, if you have a look on the right side, we carefully select and define our raw materials in accordance with the end product and the end use, also considering the type of the filling good. Additionally, we have recurring analysis of our main raw materials. Now focusing on the quality assurance, it is necessary to secure GMP, so good manufacturing practice, on all levels with defined and controlled process operation, established quality safety and quality control systems, and a documentation of process parameters in production and quality control. To follow all these, we have concrete agreement on processing practice with suppliers and system partners, standardized and documented process operation, and product control according to GMP guideline. And we secure this in means of a certified management system. Last but not least, having a look on the product safety, the requirements on our customer side are an uncritical transfer of substances to the foodstuff by being compliant with both the global as well as the specific migration limits, in terms of minimizing the set-off in the printing process, and using a sufficient barrier for sensitive filling goods, just as chocolate, for example, or if having any doubts about compliance with migration and mentioned overall or specific migration limits. Finally, it is very important to have an evaluation on the ready products, in best case with an external testing laboratory. Now you have heard a lot about food safety, and I want to continue to talk about environmental safety for the next couple of minutes. So unfortunately, next to pandemic virus, we as a global society also have other challenges, like climate change and plastic waste, for instance. The concept of Cradle to Cradle provides alternative solutions by providing products that consist of so-called nutrients. And these nutrients remain in the cycle of goods instead of being waste by the end of the product life. Looking at the Cradle to Cradle scheme, we have a biological cycle on the left and a technical cycle on the right. But the steps are basically the same. By the end of production, you have your good that is being used. After usage, the product will either be returned and disassembled to technical nutrients, or biological degradation leads to biological nutrients. Both can be used to produce new goods again. So results are recyclable and therefore environmental friendly products. But who are the drivers for C2C, and what are the consequences, and what are in the end the benefits of Cradle to Cradle? The printing industry is required to follow circular economy principles by legislation and by brand owner. In contrast to metal and plastic, coatings cannot re-enter the system as technical resources since their original properties cannot be reclaimed. Therefore, it is very crucial that our products do not harm the environment or disturb the recycling process of the cardboard, for example. As a consequence, a risk assessment of raw materials is increasingly required at each single stage along the supply chain. A valuable step in optimization of the products on the way to Cradle is the material health certification, the so-called MHC. But what is this MHC? So, the material health certification is a toxicological evaluation of used raw materials carried out by an independent and external experts. This allows manufacturers like us to learn more about the chemicals that are used in the products and to avoid substances of concern, even across the whole supply chain. And only those who meet all strict requirements receive the material health certification. In addition to compliance with this strict evaluation, there are also other demanding requirements, such as the product does not contain banned list chemicals above relevant limits, hazardous substances as well as CMR raw materials are excluded, and all requirements described in standard for emission testing of volatile organic compounds are met. As a consequence, ACTEGA's food-safe products are certified in the criteria of material health category in a Cradle-to-Cradle certified product standard. For this purpose, all ingredients used in the food-safe portfolio were defined, evaluated, and subsequently approved in the comprehensive raw material matrix. Therefore, the entire food-safe product line has been awarded the gold level in terms of material health certificate. This provides an even stronger proof of material health, product safety, and ecological quality.
As you may have already heard from our regional sales representatives, from the press release or via social media, food safe is no gold. In the last chapter of today's web seminar, we would like to present you to the Food Safe Goes Gold story and explain what it is all about. Since more than 10 years, ACTEGA's Food Safe portfolio stands for water-based coatings for direct food contact. As a minimum requirement, we approve direct contact for dry and fat-containing foods. To add a further value regarding food safety, we approached the renowned EPEA Institute to assess the entire food-safe raw material matrix against the globally recognized cradle-to-cradle material health standard in a toxicological way. As a convincing result, all food-safe products achieved the gold status of the Material Health certification by the Cradle-to-Cradle Products Innovation Institute. This enables us and our partners to be part of a more sustainable supply chain. As I mentioned before, your safety is our first priority. At ACTEGA, we do all we can to meet our responsibilities and provide you with the highest level of safety and regulatory compliance. We take this responsibility very serious and consider it essential to comply with the latest standards or have products qualified in this respect. For this reason, food-safe coatings provide the basis for legally compliant food packaging, especially because the low migration potential of food-safe coatings is supported by further important key factors. Unwanted compounds like mineral oils and plasticizers are excluded, and the compliance with the relevant food contact regulations, for instance, the Swiss ordinance or the PIM, which was presented earlier, is obviously given. All in all, the food-safe gold status enables 4 major advantages for our partners and customers. The food-safe product range provides a high level of safety because all ingredients are toxicologically evaluated and qualified towards material health gold standards. As our coatings for direct food contact are based on the approved raw material metrics, products can be newly developed or easily adapted without losing their material health gold status. This offers both us as a supplier of consumables and especially you as a converter, printer, brand owner, or consumer the greatest possible flexibility in product selection. Additionally, a time-consuming external certification on a product-by-product basis can be avoided. And lastly, additionally, measures are taken to secure the highest level of safety. We consistently provide monitoring of our raw material portfolio by performing screening analysis and migration testing in our sophisticated in-house analytical laboratories. At the end of the day, using ACTEGA's food-safe gold coatings means you can support your customers, the brand owners, to achieve their committed cradle-to-cradle objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing all this information, Lisa and Thomas. We asked today's audience, if you are interested, just stay tuned, visit our website, follow us on social media, register for our newsletter, or order our publications for free. Of course, you can also contact our experts from today's web seminar with your individual requests. We are more than happy to assist. And now it's time for our Q&A session. It looks that we have some very good questions here in the chat. Please be in mind, if we cannot cover your question, the team will follow up with you individually after this session. So let's start with this question here, which, yes, this one here, which is for Lisa. What is the difference between the A and B list of the Swiss audience? Very good question.
Absolutely, I agree. So the Part A list contains chemical substances that have been toxicologically evaluated, and a specific migration limit has been defined for each substance individually. On the other hand, the substances listed in Part B have not been subjected to any officially recognized toxicological testing, but they are still allowed to be used in coating formulations with a default migration limit of 10 ppb. So the respective migration limits must be met for substances in Part A and Part B to be fully compliant with the Swiss ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we really received many questions here. Here we have a good one for Thomas. Could you please once again summarize what is the benefit of MHC products for printing companies?
Yes, of course. Yes, if you, for example, next to the points that we already delivered, if you have a look on big brand owners, and it doesn't really matter if it's a producer of food stuff or personal care or other products. Lots of them set goals in reducing carbon footprint, for example, by lowering the CO2 emission, what, for example, we do as well. And or they try to decrease waste by implementing Cradle to Cradle, as we presented. And therefore, using MHC certified coatings, you can proactively approach these brand owners and take chance, not just being in the supply chain, but more being a partner achieving these goals. So besides the environmental advantage, we clearly see as well business opportunities for our customers in MHC coatings.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. And Lisa, here's one for you. Is the material health certificate gold valid for an unlimited period?
No, they are not. So the certificates are valid for 2 years. And after this period, revalidation of the raw material metrics is indicated or even required by these institutes. So since we always want to offer the latest and best safety level, regularly re-evaluation also makes sense after 2 years.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Lisa. This is good to know. I have now a question for Thomas. Is MHC limited to water-based coatings or are UV coatings available?
Yeah, we of course started with water-based coatings. As you can imagine, this is the majority of our output into the market, especially if you think of food packaging. And you have to think about, it's quite a big challenge to evaluate. Yeah, we had more than 100 components, and I think it was even more than 200 substances. With a content of down to 100 BPM in our finished coatings. This have to be evaluated. So, but of course, our next step is to screen our new joint portfolio of ACTEGA Schmidt-Reiner and ACTEGA Terra to define now UV-based candidates for material health certification. So this is, let me say, like a starting point for the UV section.
Okay, thank you. Let me check. One further question for Lisa. Does a material health certificate gold only apply to Europe?
Well, that is a good question. Thanks for that. No, the evaluation according to the material health criteria follows a globally recognized standard, which actually applies in all economic regions and not only in Europe. So the MHC Gold certification for our food safe coatings is also valid worldwide and does not lose this status outside Europe. So that means that our products can also be marketed globally under this label.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And Thomas, I have one further question for you. Is MHC only available for a few selected products, or is it a real portfolio?
Yeah, as I just said in the question before, talking about the variety of our MHC Gold certified products, we have started with around, I think, 25 products mid of last year. Today, we have certified a total amount of more than 100 coatings, and this covers really a broad range of our portfolio. You can get MHC coatings from standard dual matte to matte coatings to gloss coatings, high gloss coatings, as well as special and functional coatings like, for example, barrier coatings, sustainable formulated coatings, anti-slip coatings, or a primer for later UV coating. Also, if you have a look on other markets besides the paper-based packaging, we can also offer MHC Gold certified solutions for heat seal applications, for playing cards, or even for IML applications. So I'm pretty sure you will not find any other coating supplier offering such a broad portfolio.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. And the last question is for Lisa. Is it necessary to carry out any migration studies on the finished article, or is the material health certificate good enough?
That truly is a frequently asked question, so I don't hear this the first time. So thanks for this one. The answer is clearly yes. Migration studies are an important key element to show compliance with the relevant food contact regulations. So especially regarding the given migration limits. So I've talked about the Swiss ordinance A and B lists. This really defines which migration limits must be met. So of course, to comply with regulations and legislations, in addition to the MHC certification, migration studies must be done. Yes.
Okay. So thanks, Lisa and Thomas, for answering the audience questions. Now we close the Q&A session. I know there are a lot more questions, but I promise that the team will follow up with you individually after this session. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any further topics to discuss, please don't hesitate to contact us. That's it. See you soon. Bye.